Right, hello. Getting back into regular viewing this week, so to speak, in so much as that this is episode 17, where I will be going back into the regular Sisyphus complex solution. Title this week is Tell a Lie Often Enough, blah blah blah. If you've seen the quote at the beginning, you'll know exactly what that's all about, and you'll hopefully will have read what my take on that is. And it is going to have some relevance. Gin and tonic this week. Nice. Anyway, obviously things continuing to be as mad as ever. I've literally just had word a moment ago that where I am in the UK has just suddenly been named the hotspot of the UK for the Ponzi China virus, all of which means absolutely nothing to me. A bunch of people have got the sniffles in the area. Well, that's never happened before, has it? Anyway, like I said, the lunacy is continuing, as many of us expected it to and have warned about numerous times, which again goes towards making it even more important as to why understanding these kinds of processes become important. I might be a little bit off me game here momentarily because I'm literally just coming into doing this after watching Tim Paul, Alex Jones and Michael Malice. So anybody that understands what that means, and that's, I mean, it's a bit of a mind fuck, and then trying to come into doing this afterwards. But anyway, yeah, I need another sip. So, like I say, it does become more important for people to be able to understand what the different processes are, and it's in as much as possible, some of these processes at the right point in time will be fed through to relevance to last week and the party political broadcast, which was the Heritage Party. We'll see how that one goes. I can't really say one way or the other at the moment, but we can certainly hope, because we sure as shit can't rely on any of the established parties that we've got at the moment. And above all, if there is going to be a party that is going to be coming out of the woodwork, whether it's going to be the Heritage Party, whether it's going to be any other party for that matter, I don't really care, as long as it's not a bunch of criminals that we've got at the moment, then it's going to be so much easier if everybody else understands exactly what it is that we're dealing with. Now, one of the parts that I'm going to go into, because you may know, and that anybody that's watched this before, occasionally I'll do a video recommendation before I get started. Now, this week I do have a video that I will be discussing. I'm not going to go into it for too long, but it saves me. It often drags on for about 2 hours, but anyway, it was important to talk about this one because it has relevance to what's going on at the moment. It's not a particularly, like I say, it's not really a recommendation. I'm going to put it in there because it's something that I disagree with, but in this world of nobody wanting to hear anything else other than their own echo chamber, I think it is actually important to listen to this particular, or to advise of this particular conversation, because I know that there are some people that are actually utilising the advice already. So I want to give a little, just a tad of my take on this. I won't be going into it to any massive amount of detail because I haven't reached those departments yet. I mean, this sort of stuff will end up being explained as best I can in terms of what's going to actually go into the stage of the process when I actually get around to the relevant departments. So the video in question is, it's David Icke, old lizard man. As is quite often the case with people like David Icke, I mean, as I say, I've just finished watching Alex Jones, who I find entertaining and that, but in terms of if you watch his own actual show, quite often it's a struggle to get through it, put it that way. David Icke is another one that's, just because he says certain things that are something. Let's just put it straight. Some things are true. Some of the things that he's saying and that are exactly the same as what I would say. But there's ways and means of saying things at the same time. Again, not to say that somebody should be able to speak in a different way that I do. It's not as if I'm some great fucking orator, but every now and again, the problem I get with people like David Icke is they will say something where they haven't thought through what it is that they're saying. That it is actually an accusation that can be levied towards a great many people. I dare say it could probably be levied towards me on occasion. But the point that I want to get across here, and that is that if you are going to have a look at this video, and that, because like I said, there is a element of relevance and truth to this. It's just the way that it's packaged and how it's presented and what it's supposed to be resolving that is the issue, as far as I'm concerned. When you get this sort of stuff, and that you have to be able to think for yourself and look for things for yourself. Don't just take everything on face value. Look into things with a bit more foresight, essentially, because the key problem I've got with this and this conversation around common law, and is a government essentially a corporation? Yes, of course it is. As you'll have noticed from the process that I've been running step by step with each one of these different departments, each one of these offices, there's a reason why I've got the annual reports and accounts, because they are subject to the same corporate laws as everybody else is. There are countries out there that are actually operating under a very similar system to the UK, and that don't have a constitution either, and that are not getting the same level of accountability. And that's, I mean, it's literally up to you to find out if that's your country and that what it is that they're actually supposed to be obliged to perform. Because if they're not reporting in the same way that we're getting in the UK, they're essentially what's known as delinquent. But anyway, the thing I wanted to pick up on this one, and like I said, I will put a link in the description, feel free to watch it and that, but like I say, if you do, think about it. Think about it properly, because some of the stuff that they talk about is conflated, and other areas that they talk about are irrelevant, and then even other further areas are total lack of secondary considerations. So when it comes down to the laws of the land coming from maritime law, yes, obviously, I mean, all things have an origin. It's just been the case that within the UK, which is spread across a whole range of different countries around the world, is that the terminology has been borrowed and kept for these, what was it, 400 years or whatever. So just because something has an origin in something doesn't necessarily mean it is root and branch then taken into the big conflation part of things and conflating it towards something like slavery. I mean, that was just an absolutely farcical conflation of what this is. If anybody wants to know anything about slavery in the UK, it's not based on the bloody, God, what was it called? The transatlantic slave trade. It's nothing to do with that. The real slavery in the UK was under the name of serfdom, and that continued right the way up through and into the 1950s, probably a little bit further on. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see that there's stuff of that nature still continuing. But serfdom was the slavery within the UK, not just simply bringing in corporate law from the maritime law. Conflating those two things is absolutely idiotic. Now, the part that is useful is for people to understand the fact that we don't have a constitution, and therefore we do have elements of common law to fall back on as an individual. Okay, now when you're talking about having a contract with government as an individual, it is quite easy to then turn around and utilise that law to best effect on an individual level. So I've seen some people that are managing to confuse the police at the moment, and that in terms of stopping businesses from being shut down, but they're going to run into problems. They will run into problems because that is actually not an individual, that's a corporation, so that's a problem. And this is why the secondary considerations need to be taken into account. But when you've got absolutely draconian, totalitarian laws that are being used at the moment over like mask mandates and lockdowns and things of this nature, policemen coming up and trying to fine you for basically just walking in the street and that, minding your own bloody business, things of this nature, by all means, make best use of the areas of common law that you've researched yourself. And if you're not able to research it yourself, make sure that you're looking at multiple sources around this, because I'm not going to give 100% advice on this at this stage, because like I say, I haven't come across, I've not done the deep enough dive on it to be able to give that kind of formal advice. What I can say as an immediate sort of a stopgap is that you make sure that what it is that you're doing is based on a single issue, that there has been no disclosure and therefore no contract on the specifics towards any fines that are being issued or anything like that. And then when you have, you'll understand if you watch it, if you don't already know about this, and this terminology of them saying, do you understand, and the response being, I do not stand underneath you. You don't need to say that. You just say, no, I don't understand. You know, I mean, I'm sure somebody likes to think that they're being all clever using common law for something like that to try to, and basically you just end up looking like a prat. Just saying that you don't understand is enough. But you can dispute on the basis of non-disclosure and whether you accept that particular part of the contract. Now, when you're doing this, and the reason why it's important for you to understand that it is based on a very single issue, is because if you come across in any way, shape or form as denying a contract with government across the board, right, unless you've seriously, thoroughly understood exactly what it is that you're letting yourself in for. If you are somebody that is currently out on furlough, if you are somebody that is reliant in any way, shape or form on services, benefits, anything of that nature, if you are then making it known that you are severing a contract with government, all of that disappears. Okay? So when you look towards the end of that particular video, if you watch it, and there has been this final, very brief admission that the way that the legislature works at the moment is more to do with a protective measure, not a slave measure, a protective measure. If you remove that contract, you lose those protections. I can't say that strongly enough, and this is why I think this particular video, whilst it has, I mean, it's given food for thought for me as well, but you cannot take it on face value, because you have to understand what secondary considerations are. You have to understand cause, effect. Know what you're letting yourself in for. Okay? So removing your government contract protections, you have to know full well what you're doing before you do that. So be very, very cautious around what it is that you say and how involved you make it. So if you're going to use anything that you get in advice in terms of this particular subject matter, know what it is. For the time being, if you get approached in any way, shape or form that you think is appropriate to use this, make sure it is based on that single issue. So I do not understand. I have had no disclosure of this, and therefore I am not participating in this contract. Zip. Nothing else. Okay? The good part to it would be, and I'm going off of essentially common sense here, is that within the legislature there are certain elements of law where it's essentially sort of compacted and compartmentalized, I suppose would be a way to put it. So that in terms of where you stand as the individual, and when you have laws like this, which are frankly not very clear laws and have not gone through the full process, this is going to be part of the protection that you can use for yourself, is that it hasn't gone through the process correctly. And that's why there's a couple of words: this specific part I do not understand, I don't consent, there was no disclosure. Yeah, do not consent. That's also an important part. If you're compartmentalizing it yourself to keeping it to that single issue, then you should be maintaining protection amongst all of the other areas, should you in some way have some level of dependency. Because again, what you have to understand is, so for example, if you remove the contract, that means you don't no longer have your national insurance numbers. It means that you're going to struggle to end up having a bank account. It means that you're going to struggle having anything to do with being able to hold a job independently. You may then need to be forced creating a new company, or creating like a sole trader scenario. But again, you have to be careful, because you then might end up forming a contract again. So like I say, it's all about the secondary considerations, and be very, very, very careful. Okay, I wanted to make this brief, probably not very clear analogy in that, but just trying to give some sort of perspective, and that for people to at least think before you act. Because when I did see this and that, it was immediately ringing off alarm bells for me. And if it rings off alarm bells for me, and I'd spend an awful lot of time looking into all this shit, it seriously does need people to be thinking about it. Just because you've got some office up in Scotland that's got about 4 people and 2 people in England, these people are not proper lawyers, for one thing, from what I've understood. And you need to be exceptionally careful where you're laying all of your eggs. Don't put all your eggs in that one basket. And like I say, people that have, in particularly, especially right now, when certain people are dependent on protections, as much as fucked up and as appalling as they may be, you're going to be in a situation where you need them right now. So be very, very, very careful. Right, wanted to make that known. So, like I say, have a look, take a look at other resources. He does have something on there, and that to say that, you know, that he's given the links to the website, and that for these people that are claiming to be the experts on common law and all this sort of stuff. Don't, by all means, go and have a look at that as well, but don't just take their word for it. Use as many resources as you need to make sure that you've got a cohesive argument and a limited single issue case, so you don't lose your other protections. Okay, because there are other parts of, I suppose, like medieval or ancient law within the UK that I noticed that the guy did not mention. I haven't got time to go into it right now, but whether that was done on purpose or not, I don't know. But there are laws that also fall in line with the same timescales, I suppose, and then going back beyond the formation of your basics of common law, and that are still in place to this date, and that also can override the legislature. And that's specifically to do with royal prerogative, and also, I forget what it's called now, but it's something to do with the church land. And if you really did want to dig deep in, or force them to dig that deep into it, you might end up with one hell of a Pandora's box that you do not want to open, because you might find out you're in more trouble than you thought. So, like I say, be very, very careful with these things. Okay, I think that will, probably a bad explanation, but whatever. You get the idea. Just think properly and look into things properly. So let's move into the Sisyphus complex solution, because I've got the departments that I've looked at this week, and that are not overly complex, so I can go through 4 of them. Right, so again, it's within the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy department, and yes, these are all independent, and they've all got their own annual reports and so forth, all the links are in the description to back up everything that I say. So there isn't an awful lot to say really about the British Hallmarking Council. Rather amusingly in that it's a net contributor. I should have put that in blue really, shouldn't I? Oh no, it's not a net contributor, sorry. It's a net deficit, I believe, of £8. So yeah, whatever. I mean, in terms of what the Hallmarking Council, I should say, does, you got the responsibilities there. You can read through and you can see what it is yourself. There's only minor areas that I would look at in terms of this particular council, as to whether, I mean, I know there's certain things that they do in terms of measurements, and then obviously that's whether it's to do with precious metals and that, and the stamping of it, that's, you know, that it's been authenticated and things of this nature. In terms of measurements, I think there is another department which we'll probably come to a little bit later on, or at least a very close relationship with government. Offhand, I can't remember what they're called now. It's gone out of my head. So this is what you get from watching Alex Jones. There is another department it's based just on the outskirts of London, that is very heavily involved in terms of the classification and clarification of measures, weights, measures, things of this nature. So I think this is one of those departments where there isn't anything that stands out as dramatic, apart from within the reports themselves. And that I've got a bit of a question that I would look towards answering within a review, in terms of the levels of personnel that they have, and the costs for the council overall. It's like, because I mean, you've got the British Hallmarking Council, but then you've got the hallmarking offices, of which there are 4. This to me looks like it's slightly separated to that. It is sort of an oversight to the offices, and the reason why that raised the flag to me, and that is because obviously you can't run 4 offices around the country and all have it run by the same person, because they're effectively turning around and saying, or they're declaring the equivalent of one person. Seems a bit unlikely. Plus the council itself is made up of something like around about 10 or 12 members. So in terms of a paid person, it's perfectly possible for people to be sitting in a council just for the purposes of stature and things of this nature, and that, just giving in some advice and not being paid for it. Because like I say, the budget, everything around this and that is not particularly dramatic at all. So this is one of these departments that I would just look at in terms of just give it a review over, check to see if there's any irregularities, just standard stuff like that. So, and like I say, I mean, when it comes down to the weights and measures, like I say, I'd like to be checking to make sure that we're not ending up with a scenario where we've got 2 departments doing the same thing. So not an awful lot to explain around this, but it's one of the listed corporations. It's part of government. It does receive money from the taxpayer. Obviously that doesn't work out as too big of a problem, but we need to run through all of these to make sure we know what government looks like. So that's them dealt with for now. It's gone into the RASIC, the risks, what needs to be looked at, why it needs to be looked at. It's all gone into the RASIC. That'll move to the second stage. Right. The Civil Nuclear Police Authority. This is an unusual one that I wasn't overly aware of previously. I mean, I understand having some protection around nuclear sites, but what I wasn't overly aware of was the number of officers in total. Well, I mean, the organisation itself contains 1,559 staff, and they are protecting 10 nuclear sites, so they're not protecting all of them, and yet there are no revenues associated with this. And it becomes particularly important at that because the sites that they are guarding, protecting, whatever you want to call it, they're not government-owned sites. They're, I think nearly all of them are, or all of them actually, are EDF. So why we have this specialised force acting as like a private security firm and a heavily armed security firm? The questions that I've got immediately are as to why there are so many officers just for 10 sites. And like I say, if this is essentially a private security operation, where are the revenues? Yes, having guarding around nuclear facility and that to make sure that there's no particular issues around there. So I mean, I suppose I'll touch on the little graph at the side as to the lists of security breaches that they've got, which I mean, I suppose you could say, and that is not overly dramatic, and most of them are more to do with forgetting devices. I suppose there's a little bit of hacking involved when if you read between the lines of some of these things. Like I say, the personal data and things of this nature. It's not really sort of hands-on charging through the gates type of issue, but I mean I have actually worked inside a nuclear site previously. I'm not too sure if I've mentioned this before. But that was based out in Japan, and I can't even remember which one it was. The security levels and the difficulty in being able to gain access to these sites is stringent enough without any need for somebody to be running up to you with a bloody great big gun. So as a prime example, when I was going into the nuclear facilities and that, which I really didn't like because you have to put on all the proper bloody suits and all that sort of stuff, and I was out in Japan, so you know I'm quite a bit bigger than the average Japanese person, and it was that ended up causing me a problem going into one of these sites, because they have like these little pods that you have to go into, which will the exit door is obviously already closed. Once you step into it, then the entrance door closes behind you. Then you're stood on top of a kind of like a measurement plate that is checking your weight. There's also measures in there checking your height. You've also got this, I mean, I'm not going to go into all of the details of what the security systems are, but then there is a measure of, there's some biometrics involved as well. Now, because of my height and weight, the system had not been set up to actually understand somebody of my size. So it was all set up for, obviously not for your standard Japanese person, and for the staff that worked on the site. So because it's registered me as being too big, it basically wouldn't let me out. So, and I was stuck in this little pod thing for getting on for a good I don't know, 15-20 minutes or more, something like that, and you can't sit down because it's all too small and narrow, and you literally just have to stand there and wait for somebody to come through and do what they do to enable the doors to open. So I mean, it's not as if, and then even then, once you've got through that, you've got to know where you're going and how you get through the various different locking systems. That then just gets you into the dressing rooms, for which then you go through yet another part of the process. And you go through quite a palaver before you actually enter the site itself. So it's not as if it's a location that you would expect a bunch of rampaging lunatics to be able to just charge their way through. I mean, it just doesn't happen. I was going inside there and had to demonstrate a laser ablation system, because utilising the laser ablation systems you can actually remove the nuclear contamination from tools and various other different things that can be done. But yeah, going through those kinds of processes, I understand on nuclear sites how well it is set up. So why they've suddenly got this level of force surrounding so few sites, of which, to be quite frank, a number of them that are due for decommission anyway, something doesn't add up there. Now, I understand that there's a more potential for terrorism at these sites in the UK than there would have been in Japan. However, I don't know, it just seems like a little bit of a head scratcher, this one. I'm not overly sure what they're playing at. Yeah, especially being that heavily armed. I find that one very unusual. But anyway, like I say, it's something for us to be aware of. It's something for us to be considering, especially given the high cost, and that is a pretty staggering cost, especially when you're looking at 10 sites. There are secondary considerations around this, that if revenue were to be demanded for security, then that all ends up going through to energy bills. You know, would that end up being as much of a cost to the taxpayer as the overall cost? Who knows? But yeah, I think there's enough there in that to just sort of raise a little flag to say, okay, we might want to have a look at this, because having something like this external to the regular forces just seems a little bit bizarre to me. So that'll do for the time being in terms of this particular office. Anyway, okay, the Coal Authority. This is another one that is well, this is one that makes so little sense that my recommendation here and that is to abolish it. I'll just jump straight in with that. Essentially, the key purpose, as much as they've got their purpose up here and that, there's only one part of that little circular diagram there and that of their purpose. There's only one part that you really need to pay attention to, and that is mining legacy. Because essentially, I think this particular authority still exists because it is picking up on any areas of liability from historical work. If there are any mines where there's going to be a development put over the top of it, and is that going to be safe or not? Would everything collapse? Things of this nature. But at the same time, they kind of give the game away within their stated, on the far side, not the stated purposes, where they say that they've got data and they work with the Geospatial Commission. Well, effectively, in that, if the Geospatial Commission have got that information anyway, then why do you need this, other than the fact that this is the authority that exists in case there is an issue around liability? The reason why I think this can be abolished is because if there is outstanding liability, it can be transferred. It doesn't need to have this £48 million cost. And I don't care that it does say that they've got some revenues. I mean, in terms of the created value and minimised cost to the taxpayer, oh, we saved £2 million on recycling. Oh, bugger off. That's not a saving to the taxpayer, you bloody idiots. We recycled 77% of our removed items. I mean, give me a break. These are not. This is not tangible bloody savings at all. This is just faffing around the edges. This makes absolutely no sense to me at all. So I mean, if you're looking towards an annual cost of 48 million, I'm sorry, but no, we can minimise the cost of the taxpayer much more significantly, and to the amount of 48 million pounds by getting rid of it. Like I say, any kind of scenario whereby there's any liability, any intentions to be able to cleaning up any sort of previous issues or anything like that. Again, you've got the environmental departments that can handle these matters. It doesn't have to just lay within a separate authority. So I don't see the point of this. So right, there is one particular caveat around this particular area of industry, essentially, and that is the only well, there's two. I don't want to go into the whole reason as to why we don't have the coal mines anymore. That'll end up being a bloody rabbit hole that isn't really worth exploring again. One of the key points is that the coal industry itself may still hold value. Some of the technologies that have been developed in order to ensure that it doesn't. I mean, like I said, I'm not one that's going to turn around and say, well, now it can't release carbon, because that's all bullshit anyway. In terms of making sure that it doesn't have a overly negative impact in terms of air quality. Air quality is a relatively sensible conversation to have, but only relatively in that, because they do tend to exaggerate that one as well. But there are technologies in that in order to make sure that the use of coal is done effectively and efficiently. If there would be an investigation as to whether we could actually look towards making use of a resource that we do have, to what extent? Part of the investigation. Could we actually operate a coal mine again? Why not look at it? And that becomes even more important later on, because as much as we get all this, Britain is not doing this and Britain is not, because you're all following all the bullshit, the consensus, the non-science or the pseudo-science. As I'll demonstrate later on, other countries are charging forward with this. So it is a domestic resource. It can be utilised effectively and efficiently, and making sure that there aren't any, again, the secondary considerations in terms of causing any issues, irrespective of all of the pseudoscience stuff and that. If there are no issues at all, so they're not going to be going into an old mine and that and starting up again and some bloody houses fall through. This sort of nonsense. Looking towards secondary considerations. Is there a potential to be able to have a coal industry again? I would look at it. Lots of people will say that that's unpopular. Popularity is not my middle name. I couldn't give a shit. If it's something that can be of assistance to the public, I would look at it. So in that instance, then the Coal Authority might hold some relevance again. But if that were to be the case, once more, it would be something that is based on oversight, which can be handled by a different department. Doesn't need this one. So you look towards investigating, transfer the liability, as there is, and you have to look towards what the time limitations are and all this sort of stuff. We may then look towards anybody that was within this department that had some specialisation that might be useful for an oversight body, fine. But because, again, I would not investigate this to have the coal mines run by government. And I certainly wouldn't have it go through the same mistakes that it went through previously, and having all of the issues that took place back then of people chopping and changing their mind every 5 minutes. Long story, but never mind. So yeah, this is a department where, on the face of it, we can get rid of £48 million for taxpayer money there, and get rid of these departments that are spending our money and coming up with idiotic statements like we're creating value for the taxpayer and that's by doing absolute meaningless arse dribble. Don't care. Gone. Now this next one, I'm going to give you a fair warning. Did I give an awful amount of consideration to this next department? No. No. The next department is gone. And it's gone because, as I keep on saying, those are the two key questions. If you can't answer those questions, fuckety offety. Not interested. Absolutely not interested in another ideologically bent pseudoscience. It's a consensus. No, not interested. What it is a department based on lies. And what are those lies? They are lies that somebody seems to think that if they tell it often enough, I will continue to ignore it and tell you to fuck off. So that saves us 5 million quid immediately. I'm amazed that it's only 5 million quid. I think that's basically just because, like I say, there's various areas where all this ideological crap is spread all over the place. I mean, you could save an awful lot of paper immediately with all the bloody nonsense written in most of the reports. You know, about 3-4 pages. Oh, we're doing the best for our sustainable to make sure that the environment is blah blah blah. All based off of this bullshit. The amount of paper, hey, that'll save the environment, won't it? Gone, 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 gone. Go away. Not interested. And has it been up long enough for that for you to be able to read it? And please do. Anybody, if you can answer these questions, make that comment, because I'm sure the world would love to know. Get a hold of your Michael Manns and, I don't know, because I mean, you know, this massive consensus of scientists and that doesn't really seem to consist of anybody that you can name. I mean, I have done this once before on LinkedIn where I had an argument with somebody about this and they went on about the consensus. And I said, right, I will challenge you. Name for name. You write down a name of a scientist that says that this stuff is true. I'll write down a scientist that tells you it's not. I provided him with something like, I started off with, I think it was something like about 3,500. He couldn't even provide me with one. So yeah, anybody that thinks that you can give this a go, please do give it a try. And for the second part, always take into consideration, don't ever ask me what the two critical equations are, because I'm not going to give you the answer. Because if you don't know the answer, it means you don't know what you're doing. So, moving on. So those were the 4 departments. Like I said, I could get through them quite quickly today. And so this is the state of play after having those 4 departments. So again, taking into consideration that we have a particular target that we're looking towards aligning up with because of the project authority costs and so forth. So at the moment, as things stand, and that you've got the 691 million after looking through all these different departments, some of which are net contributors, some of which are not. So it's not overly huge at the moment, and like I said, we are still looking for close to 9.5 billion, something like that. Yeah, because I haven't put zeros in there. Yeah, 9.5 billion we're still looking for. So it's still early days. Like I say, there's 49 of these departments to get through, so we will see if it all adds up. And again, keep in mind, when I've turned around and said about this confirmation as to what was said through this David Icke's common law stuff, in terms of the government being a corporation, yes it is. All of these corporations, essentially, and they are all subject to the same laws as your standard corporation. The numbers need to add up. If they don't, there is an issue. The issue then also goes forward to the National Audit Office. Why have these figures not been spotted in error? So when it comes down to things where you're looking towards being able to catch out large organisations in wrongdoing, in false reporting, in delinquent reporting, in unsubstantiated numbers, etc., etc. If all of this stuff doesn't add up correctly, there is actually a case to be made against government. So that's another thing that people need to keep in mind. So there's several different purposes and several different paths that this entire project can actually take, where legitimate questions can be asked and would need to be answered. And if they're not answered, my God, you can hold some accountability there, within their own laws even, as much as I'm sure they would try to squeak out of it. So, like I say, I mean, we have the think tanks out there and that are supposed to be looking at this sort of stuff on a regular basis. They don't seem to do it. So, might as well be me. So, in terms of policies, so because of shutting down those two departments or abolishing those two departments, so you can see there, and that off the added the have I have somewhere, yes, up the top there, and that I've put abolish, where you've got the long line of after the abolish, and that's so the CA and CCC, so Coal Authority, Climate Change Commission, gone. Obviously I've got another line for abolish, which I will have to make use of next time, and that because it's getting a little bit too close to banging into my ugly mug. Then the other two departments are where? And what were they? BHC. Okay. So review, I've added the British Hallmarking Council, and then the Coal Authority, not the Coal Authority, sorry, the Civil Nuclear Police Authority. Yeah, that's under the reform and review. So this is all going into there's inputs already within the risk register. Some of it's in terms of like the Climate Change Commission, that's in the lessons learned, and then the second phase investigations are included within the RASIC. So once again, at the right point. I mean, because I've got a fair way through it, and that I might show you how things have developed in as much as you're able to see it, because I'm not too sure how I'll format it. I might just have my screen up and just run through, but I mean, it's not like you're going to learn anything in particular, but you'll be able to see how I'm formulating things, so that you understand as to how the process works. So that is the stage that we're at in terms of the policy developments, aims, goals, call it what you will. So that takes us into
Fuck off! Who you think you are, you cheeky fucking twat!
everybody's favourite, all 37 of you, because I've lost 2 subscribers in the last week, I think, something like that. I'd got to the mighty heights of 39 and dropped to 37. Outrageous. I think I must be being shadow banned. Oh, and by the way, before I move on, I'm also starting to upload onto BitChute as well now. So there's only the first 2 episodes up there, but and I understand there's an issue in terms of if you're not logged in, you can't watch it. But I'm just setting up some alternative at the moment, and that just in case that my language and some of the things that I do disclose, which I will be doing again in a minute, just in case it all annoys the wrong people, which I'm sure will happen at some point. So, in terms of the United Nations, who's the victim this week? All of us are the victim of these arseholes, but anyway. Right, so IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, Kristalina Georgieva, something like that. as I've demonstrated on a number of occasions, what we're dealing with on an awful lot of these different tentacles is communist, 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 socialist, communist, socialist, communist, communist. And what do we get here? Surprise, surprise, somebody who studied at the Karl Marx Higher Institute of Economics. Wonder what on earth she could possibly have learnt there. Now, this is a woman from Bulgaria. And there's a couple of parts to this. I mean, I am putting one particular story in the links where I'm going to put the caveat in, and that's to say that within the article, when you get down to the bottom of the article, it does actually say, and there's no sign of this on the screen, this is something I'm just going to say. There's a caveat at the end of the article which says that the accusations were withdrawn. Now, just because something is withdrawn doesn't necessarily mean that it's not open to question. And there are things that seem a little bit unusual about Kristalina, because the accusations that are levied against her is that you have to keep in mind the history of Bulgaria and essentially the partnership and that with the Soviet Union, and the fact that Bulgaria was basically a communist country up until 1990, I believe. Now, this is somebody that was born in 1953. Okay. So the specific accusation is that she was involved with organisations to do with the Communist Bulgarian Secret Service. Don't know if that's true, but you know, we're dealing with somebody that's studied at the Karl Marx Higher Institute of Economics. Yes, she has studied at other places as well. I don't care. That's a start point. When you get somebody that's got a start point of that kind of ideology, generally it doesn't tend to just disappear. It's also been linked with organised crime in Bulgaria. For the countries that were within this communist, basically a part of the communist Soviet Union, there's not much point trying to skirt around it. To have involvement with the Secret Service, that would definitely have to be something to be presenting much more proof than the article alludes to. In terms of organised crime, because you were dealing with countries that, or massive states essentially, that wasn't exactly doing well, shall we say, as is always the case with socialists and communists. An awful lot of stuff coming into those countries, and that would have been done through the black market. So to have some level of involvement, I mean, to be getting the kind of attention and to be being involved with the type of authorities within the Bulgarian political structure, you are going to have some level of contact with black market. It's just as simple as that. I mean, there's a reason why in these countries that when you have a socialist and communist country, you tend to notice how most people are not exactly walking around looking like they've been well fed. And yet you look at the leaders of these parties, and they're all fat bastards. That ain't all just coming through what they've pinched from the local farmer. So she's not exactly. I mean, obviously that the picture there, and that is in the later stages, and that went round about today. She don't exactly look the healthiest person. I mean, she's a bit of a chunk. But I think if you look back to some of the historical photographs and that, she's always had a bit of a paunch, shall we say. So, yeah, you don't get to be well fed in these countries unless you actually have some access to the black market. So I don't think that information is something that can be dismissed out of hand. And it certainly stands that the people that tend to fit into these organisations always have that kind of background in common. Either ideological bent or just bent. One or the other. So, the other part that is of interest, taking forward the Karl Marx part. Now, apparently, because she started her career, now this is the part that I found is interesting as well. Within the Wikipedia entry, and then also her entry on the IMF page itself, she started her career in 1993 at the age of 40. I think not. But the area that she goes into is environmental economist. So basically jumps straight in with the lying bullshit straight away. Comes out of commie, goes straight into climatard. You know, the two things do tend to go hand in hand, don't they? So, is there something to be concerned about with this particular individual? I would say yes. And we have to keep in mind as well, I mean, I can't let the IMF go without mentioning the one and only predecessor to her, the Christine Lagarde, who, if you remember, stole 403 million euros, was found guilty, and whereas anybody else, I mean, me and you, let's steal 403 million euros and see what happens. What's happened to Christine Lagarde? She's now the president of the European Central Bank. Yeah, you know, we need women in charge. Yeah. What you do need, and that is to make sure that you're weeding out criminals. Criminals come in male and female form. Doesn't matter what these bloody social justice warriors want to tell you. So yeah, you've gone from one female thief to a commie thief. The interesting part about this that would require an awful lot more investigation, because, as I keep saying, part of the reason to look into the United Nations to this extent, and I'll be, like I say, when I've gone through the individuals, I'll then go into the organisations themselves in much greater detail. But when I've said that I want the UK to withdraw from the United Nations and all of its tentacles, it does include this one. And the contributions to the UK, you have to remember, it's the same with all nations. All nations contribute money to the IMF. You know, this isn't some route to finance that they've just suddenly grown on their own. Each country is handing over cash for them to stick into their finance system, World Bank, so on and so forth. And when we withdraw from this particular system, we have to remember that we own 4.8% of all of the monies and would be demanding that back. Now, the area where I'm uncertain, and we'll look towards the deeper dive around this later on, is to what that actually equates to. Because from base numbers that they seem to have up on their websites in terms of our shareholding, so to speak, works out at around about 20.1 billion. However, we pay something like around about that every year, so that's wrong. So that's something that I'd have to look into in much more detail. The other important part for us to remember about this, and that before, because there tends to be this ridiculous claim about monies being put into these systems, where they say, well, you know, it's not a taxpayer cost as such, because you're maintaining the money in the bank and you're earning interest on it. Well, we're not earning interest on it, because as you will understand when we move further into the economics of the country as things stand, and their continual push towards what is known as the modern monetary theory, which basically means that the fiat currency, just creating money out of nothing and turning everybody's economy into a monopoly game, basically. The cost of creating that money out of nothing, which is then to be paid back by future generations and screwing up everybody's lives forever with a ridiculous plan. The cost of borrowing that money, you know, having that done in the shape of a bond, the cost of creating that money is more than the interest received from these kinds of institutions. So not only have you got the cost of that you're passing on to future generations, you're also losing money from what you've actually invested it into. So this whole thing is an absolute farce. And it's all part of a much larger farce that these organisations are. I mean, look at the smug cow. For somebody to actually be happy to sit at a table that is literally ruining countries' futures is just, only a communist could do that. Literally only a communist could be that happy. But, you know, people don't understand these things. People don't understand what all these commies do all the bloody time, every single time. I mean, the one thing that I did find amusing in the past week or so, something like that, was Manchester University, where, you know, for the kids' protection, and they built up all these fences around the university, and the kids went out the same night and ripped them all down. I mean, fair play to the kids for doing it. However, one of the largest populations of peoples that are, the largest populations of demographic that are being indoctrinated with the most ridiculous nonsense and arse dribble around all of this communist and socialist rubbish are being spewed out of universities. So whenever you see any sort of march around promoting this kind of ridiculous ideology, so many of them come out of universities. And I just find it funny that these are the sorts of people that would be going around on these marches, and yet the first instance that they get a taste of what their ideology actually looks like, they go to try and pull it down. I mean, it literally is a case of how dumb are you people that you don't understand this stuff. So, you know, horses for courses. Maybe, you know, a lot of these people that they have to actually be put in. I mean, I'd rather they get sent off to another one of these countries than that. I mean, sent off to Venezuela or whatever, put into China or anything like that. Go and experience it before you open your mouth about it. But, you know, if you get them to, I mean, I dare say even now that there's an awful lot of them who really don't understand that those two things are so closely related, but, you know, you can only hope. So, yeah, another commie within the United Nations. So, into the World Economic Forum. There's two parts to this one. Now, the first part of this one is, oops, nothing to see here. Absolutely nothing to see here. Doesn't happen. Didn't happen. Doesn't exist. There is absolutely nothing related to do with the Biden family, No, they don't know this particular Chinese Energy Investment Corporation at all. Not at all. Doesn't matter that there was the multi-million pound deal that was put together through Hunter Biden. No, no, it doesn't exist. Forget it. Mainstream media doesn't happen. Look at my eyes. Look at my eyes. Didn't happen. Yeah. There's absolutely no way that all of this sort of stuff, and through various other sources as well, not just this particular entity, there's absolutely no relationship between that and the fact that somebody who has been in the Senate in America on an annual salary of £174,000, it's absolutely nothing to see here, and that the guy is now worth 9 million with 4 million in real estate property on top of that. Absolutely nothing dodgy at all. No, doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. So just thought I'd be absolutely clear. Nothing to see here. You have to hope and pray that Warmonger Joe gets those fraudulent votes through, which are not fraudulent at all, because there's no evidence of that at all, apart from the thousands of pieces of evidence. It doesn't. None of that exists. So yeah, totally reliable. So when I go back to the conversation earlier, and that is how I would investigate coal within the UK. Now you have to remember World Economic Forum telling us that, you know, not only are we all going to die from the rhinovirus and a bit of a sniffle, but we're also absolutely 100% guaranteed consensus climate change. We're all dead within 9 years, except for when they're producing 480 million tonnes of coal. Nothing to see here. Yeah, doesn't matter. I have included a single page link in the description that gives a much more nuanced perspective in terms of all of the different risks and opportunities in terms of the energy sector and working with the Chinese. I've got the one piece up on the screen there, and that's what apparently suggests that the Chinese and EU perspectives have become more aligned over the past 10 years. Have they really? Especially when they highlight Italy and the UK. Yeah, how's that working out for you? Judging by the fact that both nations are now being run by totalitarians, yeah, I suppose those perspectives are very much aligned, aren't they? Seriously, you couldn't fucking make it up, could you? So I thought I would highlight that particular one, but like I say, I mean, if you want to have a little bit more of a deep dive into some of the papers and op-eds and so forth, and that there's a list of some of them, you know, within that one page. So it's just a single route of resource. Some will say positive things, others will say negative things. I think you kind of get the picture as to where I stand on it, because I'd said previously as well that I seriously do not see the benefit in handing over critical infrastructure to foreign investment. So food, clothing, housing, energy, domestic. Doesn't necessarily mean government, just means domestic. So, and obviously that, I mean, you can see, because, you know, it's the World Economic Forum, you know, these people do no harm at all, do they? No, part of common law, by the way. And yeah, so when these, unsurprisingly, when the Chinese, when they do their mining and that, and this is just one little indicator, and from September of this year, killed 16 people in a mine. Is mining a dangerous occupation? Yes, it is. Are there technologies available today and that to be able to reduce that? Yes, there are. Not so sure that they're all that bothered. And also keep in mind the fact that, because this, again, even though it's it's called the China Energy Investment Corporation or whatever, and it is basically the Chinese Communist Party. That's who owns this. So, you know, don't think the two are mutually exclusive. They're not. They're exactly the same thing. And this one is part of the China's Belt and Road Initiative. And you should see some of the bloody mess that they leave in behind as they're making their way through various nations of the world. And it really is it's just an absolutely idiotic perspective that so many nations are just allowing this to happen, or being forced into making it happen. So, yeah, once again, you know, World Economic Forum, Great Reset, you know, the people that are supposed to be telling us how wonderful they are and that, and they should be they should be very much in there with the United Nations as part of this world government, telling us all what to do and that they know what's best, and whilst simultaneously either have something that doesn't exist at all, can't see that, don't, just forget about that, or doing exactly the opposite, to which they say are the key issues in society these days. You know, the energy sector, it's all got to be all of this fairy farts and Greta's sunbeams out of Greta's arse. You know, that's what's going to provide the energy for the world. You know, coal is terrible, can't go near that, it's absolutely awful, except for when you're a member of the World Economic Forum. Hypocrite much? Right, so there's a second part to the World Economic Forum, and this is based on something that really has irritated me. And a big thank you to you know who that sent me this. Take a moment to have a look at this. These two twats, otherwise known as tweets, by Adolf Schwab, the man at the top of the World Economic Forum, who was absolutely not implementing the Great Reset, following a path of progression from the Red House report at all. Absolutely no chance whatsoever is he managed to have the influence and position presented to him through access to monies gained during the period of 1939 to 1945. No. Anyway, he's actually let the cat out of the bag, which I already knew, that he is a eugenics freak, along with all of the other ones that basically all of the main voices that turn around and follow all this climatard nonsense and that, they're all bloody eugenics freaks as well. But he's literally come out and said it. So if anybody out there does use Twitter, if you can respond to this fat useless git, I mean, he really is the most repulsive Jabba the Hutt bloody Nazi. So right, he wants the birth rates to fall, and he thinks that all this social distancing, all this sort of stuff, and that is, it's going to be a positive outcome from the Ponzi China virus. Keep everybody separate so that you can't have kids, and then the population starts to fall. And then down the bottom there, the keywords, the much needed cull of people. How about we start with you? You first. It's the one thing that you always say to eugenics freaks. And anybody that's got access to responding to this fat piece of shit, the key response is yes, we do believe that you think there should be a population cull. The first people that should be removed from the planet are those who believe that this problem that you're talking about exists, especially ones that are fat, old and fucking useless, and that seem to think that any cull that takes place should be somebody else. So no, have the courage of your conviction, Adolf. You go first, the rest of us will think about it. Take your friend like David Attenborough. Take him with you as well. Always, you first. Simple. If somebody is genuinely got the courage of the conviction and they seriously think there are too many people on the planet, why does it never occur to them to remove themselves from the equation? Could it possibly be because it's bullshit? And there's some good news that you might want to remind him of, because I'd done some number. I mean, somebody might have seen a video that I did not too long ago, that called "Ooh, Scary," and it was over all this Ponzi China virus and the size of the population. So let's do the first part. When I started running the numbers for the Ponzi China virus, I made sure to check what the extent of population was within the 216 nations reporting these bullshit numbers. So as you can see, on March the 15th, that was the size of the population within those 216 nations. It occurred to me, if there was something going on of any genuine significance, say like the Spanish flu, you know, I mean, massive impact to the number of people that died there. So that then had an impact to the world population. So I thought, well, September, let's have a look and see how things were. So September the 13th, oh look, population has gone up by 53 million. Looks like COVID is not having any sort of major impact at all. So we're moving into your standard flu season anyway. And I thought, well, right, they keep on saying, oh, you know, massive problem everywhere's got a lockdown again because massive problem. Oh, people are dying all over the place. Since September, no, oh, that didn't matter, you know. That was just that was the first little blip, and that, oh, this one's going to be so much worse, despite the fact there is absolutely no evidence of that whatsoever. Again, watch Ivor Cummins. You'll get some actual facts there, and that you don't get from the likes of Boris the eugenics freak. And I hope he's happy at the moment, because he is on his own. Useless twat. But then he's also got his he's always got the company of his Rockefeller bitch. But anyway. So what does the state of play as of today, November the 13th? Oh look, it's gone up by another 13 million. Much needed cull. You first, fatso. You first. Population's doing just fine, thanks. Caveat. Arseholes like this, fascist that he is, as are all of the other appeasers that are falling in line. When they see these kind of numbers, and they understand that their little spreading of the sniffles hasn't quite worked out to plan, what you're going to tend to find is, oops, we're going to have to find something else. And in that, I would suggest there needs to be a modicum of, whether it's possible or not, a modicum of hope that once all of the fraudulent numbers have been taken out of the US election, that you end up with somebody that has been absolutely determined not to be fighting wars around the world, and hoping to God that you don't end up with the lackey, as long as he gets his couple of million quid, you say, I mean, he's a few pieces of silver and he's happy. Senile old bastard that he is. Because that man won't have a clue what he's doing, and I guarantee assholes like this will push him towards exactly what they were doing before, and there will be another war of some description, because they're going to want these numbers to come down. They're not going to be happy with the results of their current little program and the fact that it's not working. There is no cull, you fat cunt. So when you have the likes of Whoopi, I am and never have been of any relevance to anyone, Goldberg, suggesting that people should suck it up, despite the fact that it hasn't been, the election hasn't been called yet. In the event that people like her do get her little hero, old senile Joe and his crackhead boy, when they do get those people, remind them when the wars start that the blood is on their hands. The people that are prepared to vote in and commit fraud for people who will play appeasement to this, when the deaths start, when the bombs start dropping, you suck that one up, because that's what you will be responsible for. Simple fact. When you've got somebody that is so brazen as to put something like this out on a public platform and lets you know full well what it is that him and his creatures and appeasers, useful idiots, lackeys, morons, inbreds, what it is that they're actually hoping for and trying to achieve. For anybody to be in support of that, then yeah, you first. You first. Take that into consideration, because this is the sort of stuff that you will be responsible for. For him to turn around and be this brazen shows that he just does not care, that he can say this in public, doesn't care. You don't get Jack Dorsey going, this is, I don't know, inappropriate content or something like that. There's no blocking this, because those people think alike. This is okay. It's okay to say that there should be a much needed cull of people. And when he's prepared to do that, say that on a public platform, you don't think that they would actually intentionally start something to make sure that those numbers went in their favour. Oh no, this is not good enough. I mean, this now equates to a population increase of nearly 67 million just in this period alone. No, will not do. It must be a natural cull. Yeah, sure. Careful what you're voting for. But again, anybody that's out there that's working with organisations that are members of the World Economic Forum, this is what you stand for. This is who you're working with. Yeah, great until they come knocking on your door. All the more reason why every single lackey, political party, organisation, everything that is falling in line with this stuff, these eugenics freaks, because you remember eugenics and Nazi party hand in hand. If you've got all of your little useful idiots that think, oh, Black Lives Matter, this is who you're working with. You think you're going to last? Nah, not at all. So many people are being used to cause division, create hatred, create all of the problems that they're hoping will kick off and see so many people die as a result. And that's what people like this coward is seeking, because that's what he is. He's just a coward, fat, useless, inbred coward. So yeah, be a member of the World Economic Forum. ICPR 1200 is not, nor will we ever be. Any political party that I give my support to? No. But as I've mentioned in last week, I'm now paid up member of the Heritage Party. I think, even though obviously I've not put the whole thing together yet and that, but I think the new intro will probably have the Heritage Party logo on there. Yeah, responsible, decent people now need to understand which side you're really on. Which rather than being a virtue signaller, the people that sit back and go, oh, all of these things that talk about the sustainability and making sure the environment is wonderful, and making sure everybody's looked after, and we want the equality and we want this, that, and the other. Yeah, those are the messages being pushed by the fat fascist, and that's what you're falling in line with. The rest of us prefer to go along with, okay, reality. Let's make sure that we can do the best we can for people and move forward in such a way that we don't lose sight of responsibility. We don't lose sight of being able to maintain freedoms, and we don't prevent anybody from being able to have ambition and to try to reduce the risks as much as possible, so that we don't end. You'll never get a perfect system. It's just ridiculous to think you'll ever get a perfect system, because people themselves are imperfect. It's as simple as that. You can try to set up those systems in such a way as you can reduce it as much as possible, but to think it will never happen, no. But I'd rather have a system where you can look towards reducing those risks, coming across the odd occasion where somebody has bent the rules, done something wrong, and tried to do it in such a way that you'll be able to catch them, rather than having the criminals running the ship from the get-go. People who will openly state that they want you dead. Because that's what it is. I mean, when somebody openly says that they want it's a much needed cull. Really? Like I say, you first, you fat fuck. You first. And anybody else that supports all of it, you first. I'll have the courage of my conviction. You have the courage of yours. Go find your safe space and never come out. So anyway, that is kind of why the episode title is Tell a Lie Often Enough. And I will ignore you and tell you to fuck off. And that is very much the scenario we are in. More and more people seem to be coming to that awareness. And the more that do come to that awareness, the more risk there is of people taking things too far in the opposite direction as well. Either way is not a good result, which is why I think it is more and more important for us to understand that the structures that we have in place can be rectified, can be investigated correctly so that we identify the problems, that we can look towards the recreation of this government wiring map and a rational, reasonable, educated, considered solution as to how we take things forward, rather than just rampaging around with rhetoric and just nonsense. Slogans don't run a country. Proper, well thought out plans do. The difference that's between the suggestion that I'm making in terms of how we go through the Sisyphus complex solution, whether it be through the UK or whether it becomes a considered prospect for any other nation, is that it is intended to go through all of those considerations. I mean, I don't know if anybody's actually bothered to click on the link around that Great Reset plan, and I think you do still have to go through some sort of sign-up process to get through to every single bit of it. But as much as it looks like a complex plan, you know, with set out like a plasma ball and that, with the beams and that sort of spread out all over the place for all the little different subject matters. And yes, there are lots of documents within every particular segment of it, but none of it is a cohesive plan. It is not a cohesive plan. There is no consideration within that plan as to whether the technologies that they think that they're going to be reliant on actually work. There is no consideration within that plan as to what cause and effect the development of one area of idea. There is no correlation between that and how it might affect another area of their plan. There is no real structure to what it is that they're proposing at all. And that's why I can tell that it is something that is, as per usual, being put forward by morons pretending to be intelligent. This is why you have the idiots at Oxford and Cambridge and Stanford and blah blah, seeming to think that we're the most intelligent people in the world. Really? Not according to that plan, you're not. Because according to that plan, it's literally just haphazard all over the place. So you've had somebody that's made a pretty little ball and gone, oh, that subject, that subject, that subject, that subject. So what? If all of it is not interlinked correctly into a cohesive plan, it's just a toy. It's a look at me, I've put together a little program and that with lots of subjects around it. It's idiotic. There's nothing intelligent about it at all. And that's why I think there will be a very distinct reckoning around all of this. It's a key reason why I think none of it will work. Because as much as they will do everything they can to be, and well, they obviously are, doing as much as they can to make everybody's lives an absolute bloody misery, the key part that they always forget when they're pushing these kinds of ideologies is that they're too bloody stupid. They think they're clever, but they're not. And what they always forget is the plebs that they think need to be culled have always been and will always be far more intelligent than they could ever hope to be. And that's probably a big part of their problem, the absolute jealousy of that. They can steal as much money, steal as much power as they want, but deep down they know they're morons. And they're going to throw their toys out their pram. They're going to be like the Antifa, you know, the little soy boys that think that they're hard when they're running around in groups of 30. Come down my street, you little shit. Dealt with worse than you before. These people, they're just so wrapped up in hatred for themselves because they know how useless they are. They've become they think that they've got this little group together and that gives them strength. That group that they have is pitifully small in comparison to the wider populace of the world. And they know that they're idiotic messages. I mean, you could sit them in front of sit them on the table in front of you. I mean, it is always the key problem, that you'll have lots of people who say, "Oh my God, look at this program that they've got set out, and they've got all these brains all over the place. Oh, the intelligence behind it." Sit down and have a conversation with some of these people. Fucking idiots. I mean, genuinely, morons. Single subject requires consensus then, because their conclusions are so bad and so easily ripped apart that they have to get a little group together and go, "Oh no, but we all think this." Well, that just means that you're all fucking stupid then, doesn't it? Just because there's a little group of you, it doesn't make it more right. It just means that you're all idiots. I don't claim that the process and the plan, the format of what I'm doing, I'm not claiming that I have the answers to every single part of this, because it's going to get much more complicated. But I do know how to put that process together. And this is why I always say it's open to the input for people, and I will know if that input is intelligent enough or not. I know how to recognise that much. I also know that when I'm receiving a recommendation of any description, if there's any part of it that I don't understand, it doesn't take me long to have a look and find out. I might not know the answer immediately, but I can get it. And that's the part where my faith is based, is that I do know that the wider public are far more intelligent than these people could ever be. And so at the right point in time, like I say, at the moment it's like the 37 subscribers. I mean, who the hell cares? Who's watching this? Who's paying attention to this? It doesn't really matter. It really doesn't matter. At the right point in time, somebody will come across it, go, been looking for something like that. Maybe there's certain parts of it. Maybe somebody else is doing something similar that I'm just not aware of at the moment. I wouldn't be at all surprised. if there's certain parts of it that can feed into something else, I don't really care. Like I say, it's never been about everything that I know, because I don't know everything. Those pricks think that they do. That's where they make their mistake. They're not intelligent enough. And you can gather the lot of them together and you still don't have the intelligence. And that's the part that should cheer everybody up. Because come hell or high water, we will get through this. We will be alright. Things will get back to normal. Hopefully with the realisation of this sheer number of appeasers that have suddenly shown themselves in broad daylight so that we can actually see them. That's a good thing. We get to know our enemy. That's always a very good thing. Because then we know when we're putting things back together again properly, making sure things do improve, then we know who doesn't belong, and that you might need to put into the corner and say, you remember that bit about that cull that you was interested in? Might be able to help you with that. Would I suggest such a thing? Anyway, so that's episode 17. No idea how long I've been going on for again. But it doesn't really matter. If people haven't got the wherewithal to be able to stand the course, then the chances are it ain't for you anyway. So, like I say, have you think? Like I say, you've seen the four departments. What the suggestions are for that? What would need to be looked into? Give it consideration. Have a look in your own nation. What are you doing in these areas? And make your own little plan as well. Floor's open as usual. Anybody that puts in stupid comments will be deleted, because I'm not really interested in idiot comments. And Klaus Schwab, no, Adolf Schwab as you should be known, just for you. Oh, actually no. Seeing as you're from the same vein and the direct descendant of the last time we had a problem with your kind, I think actually that would be more appropriate. So, see you on the battlefield, fat boy. Everybody else, try to get through what's going on at the moment. Keep your chin up. We'll get there. Don't worry. Take care now. Bye bye.